Bill Bedenbaugh gets his guy. We'll talk about Eugene Brooks' commitment and a crystal ball for a 4-star defensive lineman on today's show. Welcome to Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners. Thank you for joining us. Today's episode is going to be brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. Every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And right off the top, Josh, he's Josh Helmer. Follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. I'm John Williams. We got a commitment. Eugene Brooks, a Rivals 4-star prospect out of California, interior offensive lineman, 6'3", 320, a mountain mover at guard for Bill Bedenbaugh and the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, important get for Oklahoma, somebody that we felt good about with Eugene Brooks and felt like he was trending that way. But to see him join Isaiah Autry in terms of the offensive linemen in this class, John, I think that all of a sudden here, because of some misses and commitments elsewhere away from Oklahoma, probably the one position group where folks were a little antsy and wanted to see somebody talented like Eugene Brooks become a part of this class. And so you've got that 6'3", 320, rated as one of the, let's round up here, right? Top 20 interior offensive linemen in the country per 24/7 Sports. So a nice get for Bill Bedenbaugh in Oklahoma.
He is, and he's a strong player, someone that is going to have to work on his feet, work on his agility a little bit when he gets to campus, but the strength is not an issue. Size is not an issue. The way he's able to move people is not an issue. It's just working on some of the finer details of playing offensive line, especially interior offensive line at the next level. I think it's a big get. I mean, anytime that you can beat a rival in Texas and a in-state school in USC for one of the top 20 guards in the country, I think that's an important win. You know, you can look at the recruiting rankings, you can look at the stars if you want to, but understand that this is somebody that Bill Bedenbaugh wanted. This is somebody that Texas wanted, somebody that USC wanted, and Oklahoma ended up with him. And again, I mean, if you're considering 20 guards and how many FBS football teams are there? 133, and you got two positions. So that's out of 260, interior guards, like to get the top 21, I think that matters. I think that's a big deal. And you can never have too many offensive linemen, especially if they're guys that are developmental guys and need to work on their game a little bit. You want to get as many of these offensive line prospects as you can, because it's really hard to find really good offensive line play. And you got to get them on campus first of all, and then you got to let them compete and let them work with Schmitty, get in the weight room, get on the field, build their game, build it with Bill Bedenbaugh, and then go from there.
Well, and I'll be the first to sit here and say, hey, I want to see Oklahoma get this blue chip offensive lineman and that blue chip offensive tackle. But the reality here for Oklahoma is that, look, this is a heck of an offer sheet that Eugene Brooks had. So you look at the offer sheet first and foremost, John, some of which you've already discussed. Texas, Arizona, BYU, Cal, and here let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. Florida State, Georgia, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Texas A&M, USC, who you mentioned, Washington State, UNLV, Utah State. I mean, there's some big-time offers in here that Eugene Brooks pulled, and so for Oklahoma to win this recruitment is no small thing, just because, again, it's not that blue chip prospect for Oklahoma in this particular individual recruitment. And I would make the argument too that not in every single interior offensive lineman's recruit, but in a lot of interior offensive linemen's recruitments, they're not always the 4-star, 5-star guys, right? I mean, that's kind of the position group where a lot of times you can have an interior offensive lineman that's a 3-star signee that winds up as an NFL talent. And I love what they said about Eugene Brooks on 24/7 Sports. I think you said this right off the top, but quote, and I quote, Eugene Brooks is a mammoth offensive lineman from Las Vegas, end quote. So, I mean, that's probably, as of right now where we're at. 6'3", 320, had a great offer sheet. And let's see where it goes for Oklahoma. And OU, you think about just the offensive line situation, John, they needed to add a name to Isaiah Autry. Let's see what happens next. I mean, obviously, we've talked about Isosa recently for Oklahoma in the plans. We'll see about Grant Bricks would be the other name that a lot of folks are hoping OU can win out there over Kansas State and Nebraska. And if that happens, if all of that materialized for OU, then this is going to be a pretty nice little offensive line haul when it's all said and done for the Sooners in this 24 cycle.
Yeah, it just comes back to believing in what Bill Beanbo is able to do on the recruiting trail as a developmental coach. I mean, we've seen him do it for the better part of a decade. Now, he hasn't been there a decade, but for most of the last decade, he's been putting together really good offensive lines. So I'm a believer in Eugene Brooks and what I've seen. He comes to campus, or eventually when he signs and then gets to campus, he comes with already really good size. You're not having to bulk him up to get him to play guard. He can play it at 320. You're not having to, build on a 290 frame and, he's 2 years out. I mean, he's a guy that could potentially come in and factor into the rotation early because he's already got the size that he's working with. So I think it's, again, you listed the offer sheet. Anytime that you're getting Power 5 offers like he got, I think that speaks volumes to the type of player that he is. And NFL guys will tell you, NFL draft analysts will tell you, offensive line is one of the most difficult positions to evaluate, especially for people who aren't offensive line coaches or former offensive linemen or offensive line evaluators. Like, that's a very difficult position to evaluate. And I think, like, the fact that Rivals has him as a 4-star, I think that should say something there. Maybe he's not a 4-star with On3 or 247, but the fact that he's a 4-star somewhere, our guy, John Garcia, he's with Rivals. We're fans of his and his work. I like how he evaluates offensive line. So there are people out there that you can trust for offensive line evaluations. And so I'm excited for what he's going to bring to the Sooners once he eventually gets on campus and then starts to compete. But you like, if you've seen the some of the one-on-one clips from the LA Rivals camp where he was one of the top performers that week, you're going to like what he brings to the table. The dude's got a bit of a mean streak. He's kind of nasty. He's going to trash talk a little bit, which is kind of fun. You don't want it to be in such a way that it draws penalties, but if it antagonizes the opposing defensive line and gets in their head a little bit, man, bring it on. So I think he's going to be a fan favorite not long after he makes his debut with the Oklahoma Sooners down the road. We got more recruiting tidbits to touch on. Josh, anything else on Brooks before we turn the page and look at some other positions?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that both Rivals and ESPN list Brooks as a 4-star because, it's easy for me to, as we're doing the show sometimes, say, okay, here's what 24/7 Sports says, or here's what On3 says. And that's what I'm looking at and thinking and talking about. Yeah. I mean, so if I want to sit here and say, okay, Eugene Brooks isn't a blue chip commit or eventual signee, well, according to half of the evaluators out there, yes, Eugene Brooks would be a blue chip signee. So no, it's obviously it's a big time recruiting win. You needed more on the offensive line, and let's hope this is the start of a nice little tear here for Oklahoma in terms of the offensive line recruiting.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially as you go into the SEC, that you get big, strong guys that you can work with and build up and make a big part of your offensive line. We got a crystal ball to talk about coming up next. First, let me talk to you about our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you got to do is go to LinkedIn, add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The latest in the Nigel Smith sweepstakes. Again, we get another prediction favoring the Oklahoma Sooners. This one's from Horns 247, and the guy's name is Jordan Scruggs. Again, Texas Longhorns recruiting analyst, choosing the Oklahoma Sooners for 4-star defensive lineman out of Melissa, Texas, Nigel Smith.
Well, probably first thing is somebody out of the state of Texas for a Texas prospect. Yeah, that's combing the coast here with our metal finder. That's ding ding ding, right? That's a good sign. Somebody from the state of Texas saying that Texas prospect is leaning Oklahoma's direction. And obviously, a bunch of attention in this class on the David Stones of the Williams Wineries of the world. But how many times have we sat here and talked about, well, it can't just be those two names. It needs to be stacking the 22 class with the 23 class, with the 24, with the 25 class. And oh, by the way, for Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis, it can't just be two names or three names in the 23 and 24 classes. No, you need to stack and stockpile talent. And Nigel Smith, top 100 player nationally, John, 6'5", 260, the length, the get off, the ability to rush the passer, elite prospect in his own right. No, it's not the last name Stone. No, it's not the last name Winery, but this would be a massive get if it swings Oklahoma's direction over, again, the offer sheet, an Ohio State, a Penn State, a Texas A&M. So yeah, I mean, I think two things for me. Number one, he's really, really good, right? And number two, the types of teams that you would potentially win this recruitment over.
Yeah, and that seems to be a consistent theme right now for Oklahoma on the recruiting trail. Is they're not just beating also ran teams. They're beating your top recruiting teams in the country for some of these prospects. And, Nigel Smith, he's still maybe a month out from his commitment, but the momentum's been there for Oklahoma for a long time. The only question was ever going to be like, would that shift away from the Sooners at some point? And it really doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. They're looking to build a really, really deep defensive line class, and Nigel Smith's a big part of that. Moving to the SEC, you got to have a good group of defensive linemen, and they're still trying to kind of recover from the 2021 group of guys that left, via the NFL draft, like, the Nick Bonitos and the Perion Winfrey and Isaiah Thomas. Like, you lost 3/5 or 3/4 of your starting defensive front, and you didn't really have much to replace that with, except for young guys that were still pretty inexperienced. So you've got a lot of building that you've got to do to lay the foundation for what Brent Venables and Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis hope is going to be a dominant defensive front when they get into the SEC, or at least maybe not right away, but by 25, 26, you're talking about a defensive front that is able to hang with anybody in the country. The best offensive lines, it doesn't matter. And they're going to be able to affect the passing game, affect the run game, and be a dominant force in the SEC. Like you said, Josh, you can't just have David Stone and Williams Noneri and expect to do that. Yeah, you got to have a lot of these guys. You got to have an Adepoja Adebari. You got to have a David Stone and a Williams Noneri if they end up committing to Oklahoma. But you've also got to have a depth of that. You got to have 2-3 deep of that so that you can withstand an injury and not be just completely gone from a pass rush perspective or a run defense perspective. I mean, you got to have a big group of dudes, and they're looking to have 6, 7, maybe even 8 defensive linemen in this class. Like, it started with Wyatt Gilmore. He kind of broke the ice on the defensive line front. And then you got Jaden Jackson, but I mean, Stone and Winery, yeah, they're the big fish because of the 5-star prospects, but Dominic McKinley, they're still, chasing him, a guy out of Louisiana that looks like it's down to Oklahoma, Louisiana, or LSU and Texas. And Oklahoma is very much in the mix for that one. Another defensive tackle prospect to pair with Stone and Jaden Jackson. And then you got Gilmore, and you got Nwaneri, and you got Smith, and you got Zena out of Allen, and Danny Okoye. Like, this is a potentially 8 deep defensive line recruiting class. But even if they just get 6 of these 8 guys, that's still an incredible haul. And I think it's very possible that they end up with at least 7, which is crazy to think that they could go that deep in the 2024 cycle, which is a incredibly deep defensive line class, and be able to pull 75% or what is that? 7 out of 8. I can't do the math. 87.5% of the prospects in there that they've been targeting and they've been recruiting heavily, the most heavily. So it's incredible. And Nigel Smith, like you said, top 100 player, 4-star consensus, 4-star prospect, someone who's going to bring a strong athletic profile with a great frame, and is going to be able to wreak havoc from the edge, be able to play that 5 technique, or a defensive end spot in a 3-man front, or be able to bump inside and play some, defensive tackle and pass rush situations. Like, it's a very, very intriguing aspect of what Brent Venables and Todd Bates are doing, finding these guys that are going to be able to fit multiple roles in their defensive front moving forward. Yeah, you got to have guys that are legit nose tackles like Jaden Jackson. But again, we talk about flexibility. They're going to have a lot of dudes that are going to be able to line up in a lot of places. And that's going to make things really difficult for opposing offensive lines to figure out who's who.
Well, and something you touched on too, and I mentioned it as well, the stacking of the classes. So the PJ Adebares of the world, elite talent, right, to go along with an elite on paper talent, and what I think we've seen from both already, but definitely Bowen in the spring game with an interception. But those types of, okay, on paper, according to what everybody says, these are elite 5-star type talents, right? But okay, then you've got an Ashton Sanders in your class, and you've got a Marcus Strong, and you've got a Taylor Wine. And then this class that we're talking about right now, John, you've already, we're talking about a prediction for Nigel Smith here. And hopefully, yes, that swings Oklahoma's direction in concert with David Stone, with Williams Nwaneri. But like you mentioned, you already have talented guys on board so far in this class for Oklahoma. One of the top players from Minnesota in Wyatt Gilmore. Jaden Jackson, I know we've spent time on it recently, but this is not an inconsequential flip. Or I like to use the term flip because, even though he wasn't committed anywhere, it was like this thing was so obviously trending either Texas or Miami's direction that in some ways it felt like a late flip for Oklahoma. So, yeah, I mean, you have to have more than just 1 or 2 names. And Oklahoma, what it did in its last class with, obviously the headlining of PJ Adebawore, what it looks like maybe they're going to do with hopefully the headlining of a David Stone, Nwaneri, and Nigel Smith. I mean, look, I think you would put Nigel Smith into the headlining type category, John. I know that maybe it's not 5-star this or that, but it should surprise nobody if Nigel Smith winds up as an impact NFL player down the road. I mean, this is that kind of potential talent.
Well, again, you go back to the top 100 aspect of that. I mean, he's a top 100 player, and you want to get as many top 100 players as you can in your class. I mean, right now, Oklahoma's got 1, 2, 3 top 100 players in Taylor Tatum, Davin Mitchell, and Zion Kearney. Again, you want to stack as much talent as you possibly can. And Nigel Smith, again, a top 100 talent. If you were just building your team out of the 2024 class, he'd be a starter at defensive end for you. If you ended up with Stone and Nwaneri, those would be 2 of your other starters along the defensive front. If you're just talking about the 2024 class based on the talent, based on the rankings. So potentially huge. And the fact that it's trending towards Oklahoma still, and it's a Texas recruiting analyst that is putting that prediction in favoring the Oklahoma Sooners, man, that speaks volumes to where this recruitment stands at this point. Again, we're probably about a month away from his recruitment. There's buzz out there that he'd like to recruit or commit whenever Melissa opens their stadium for the season opener. They built a brand new stadium, and there's talk that he wants to do the commitment ceremony there, which, hey, man, that's awesome. That's great. Great way to break it in with a blue chip blue blood commitment marriage of sorts. The last thing we're going to do here, Josh, on the show, we're just going to kind of do a bit of a 2024 recruiting reset, talk about where we're at. Oklahoma now has 16 prospects committed to the 2024 recruiting class. Again, we talked about 3 top 100 players in Taylor Tatum, who's a top 50, Davin Mitchell, and Zion Kearney. But I mean, this thing is 16 deep, and it's got a really good mix of blue chip defenders, blue chip offensive players. And, you know, the ice got broken back in March by a defensive player, Jeremiah Newcomb. Jeremiah Newcomb kind of came out of nowhere, the Arizona prospect, and kind of shocked the world a little bit, being Oklahoma's first commit of the 2024 cycle. I think, you know, we talk about the 2023 defensive back class. Well, he's going to have a chance to be potentially as impactful down the road as these guys are. And considering that, again, he was the first, I mean, he's sold out. He's bought in to what Brent Venables and Jay Valai are selling. Cornerback has been an issue for Oklahoma for years. I mean, it's been a long time since you felt comfortable with what you've got on the outside at cornerback. Adding a 4-star talent like Jeremiah Newcomb, man, that's huge for him.
Well, let's just, for my half of this equation, let's just start here. Right now, Oklahoma's number 15 nationally with its class. This is on the heels, of course, of a top 5 class, top 4 class in the last cycle. They're number 15 right now, and there's plenty of room to stretch those legs, plenty of room for Oklahoma to grow based on what is still left on the board. So from that standpoint, and that's number 15 according to On3, and that's number 15 according to 24/7 Sports. And I tried to load you up, Rivals, but you didn't want to load at this particular moment in time. So I can't tell you about Rivals, but bottom line is it's a top 15 class right now, and it's only going to keep climbing, John. So let's start there. Quarterback. Got a quarterback that you really like in this class in Michael Hawkins, who's a dual threat guy that should probably only get better and better in his own regard. I love, after the initial miss with Wesco at wide receiver, and you pass the note along to me, Rivals number 17 class. So top 15, top 17 class, depending on where you're looking. Wide receiver, what Oklahoma's done in this class, John, you know, sans Wesco, I think is really, really impressive that you went out and you got Kearney, you flipped Carry on, you've added Raggins. So the KJ Daniels you have in this class, Dozie Azukama you have in this class, running back feels like it's trending in a great direction. If you just stop the merry-go-round right here with Xavier Robinson and obviously with the nation's top running back in Taylor Tatum, okay, a class with just Taylor Tatum is an incredible class. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the country would sign up for that. Only Oklahoma will be getting that. But when you tell me that Xavier Robinson, who rushed for over 2,000 yards a season ago, is in this class and a bunch of touchdowns and is a physical, different type runner from Taylor Tatum, that's pretty exciting. When you tell me that Caden Durham is still a possibility. So offensively, great in terms of the quarterback and the skill guys. Obviously, as we've discussed, work still to be done. Offensive line. And then, you know, flipping to the defensive side of the football, John, Nesta, really, really exciting linebacker. Again, not puzzling to see Brent Venables recruit linebackers well. We've talked ad nauseum about the defensive line, even in this episode here, but we feel like there's still quite a bit of meat on the bone right there for Oklahoma. And with this news of Nigel Smith, no, it's not a commitment yet to join the Wyatt Gilmores or Jaden Jacksons of the world, but it feels like Oklahoma, John, is doing up front defensively what folks have been asking Oklahoma to do on the recruiting trail. Let's see, but it feels like it's headed that way for Oklahoma. And then defensive backs, I think it started in last year's class and is carrying over into this year's class to where Oklahoma, whether it's corner, safety, you name it, in the defensive backfield, John, they're just, in my estimation, doing a much, much better job recruiting defensive backs here of late.
Yes, I agree. I think what they did in 23 alone, if you stretch that over 2 classes, would be really, really good. But then you come back and you add Jeremiah Newcomb, you add Jaden Hardy, 2 really athletic and physical players that you're going to put in your secondary. They're aggressive players. Guys are going to attack the football in the air and attack running games as well. They're not shying away from the run game. Just really, really intriguing prospects that can add to what they did in 2023's recruiting cycle with Jacoby Johnson, Makari Vickers, Josiah Wagner, Kendall Dolby out of the JUCO ranks. I mean, it's Jay Valai and Brandon Hall. They're doing a great job over these last several cycles. You can even go back to 2022 when they, were able to retain commitments from Gentry Williams and Robert Spears Jennings amidst the coaching change and all that. They were able to hold on to those commitments and keep them in-house. And I think, what they're doing at defensive back is I think what they're starting to do along the defensive line, where you're stacking blue chip class after blue chip class after blue chip class. Defensive back is in great shape, I think. And I mean, the recruiting class in general in 2024 looks like in great shape right now. If you were to stop it right now, you'd be in a really good spot. But man, it's got so much more potential, and it can be even better by the time this is all said and done, because of you're waiting on Nigel Smith, you're waiting on Williams Nwaneri and David Stone, you're waiting on Eli Bowen, the 2024 cornerback prospect, who's going to be a really talented player in his own right. You're waiting on Danny Okoye. You're waiting on several more offensive linemen to see what they're going to do as well. So this class, I mean, it's going to be deep and it's going to be incredibly talented, but what they've done so far is awesome.
Off to a great start, and the writing is on the wall that, yes, it's going to get better. Now, a McKinley, a Bricks, okay, not ready to sign up for those types of names. I feel like a little bit of trepidation with Nwaneri for some, though the Georgia momentum stalling there, I think, should make Oklahoma fans feel even more confident. I think we think August 1st, the announcement. So I think that maybe, right. Maybe. I mean, I guess that's kind of gotten floated out there and isn't necessarily fact. Right. But I still think that's going to go Oklahoma's direction, though, obviously you don't lock that up and throw it away just yet. But the momentum for this thing, where it's already at, the prospects that are on the board, this will be another big time class. And that's what we've wanted to see Brent Venables and this staff do, outside of just going and winning football games, which I'm hopeful and, again, optimistic. And I'll say that every single time we line it up and suit it up right here on Locked On Sooners, that I'm optimistic for what 2023 holds for Oklahoma. Outside of just winning football games, it's this for OU to build for the SEC. And you have to tip your cap to this staff, man. They have, across the board, done a really, really good job so far.
They've done a great job, and they're going to continue to do a great job. And I think what they've done that's really fascinating is, Brent Venables probably doesn't want to be so transfer portal dependent down the road, but he's picked his spots and he's taken his shot at certain players and making sure to add guys that were going to be much value added, not just adding guys to add guys, but adding value to the roster with guys that are going to start, like a Dasan McCullough, Walter Rouse, maybe Caleb Schaefer, a guy like Connor Neer, who could come in and end up playing a significant role, getting a lot of snaps in the linebacker core. Reggie Pearson, who similarly could end up getting a lot of snaps in a safety rotation as well. So they've done a fantastic job at rebuilding this roster. Because, I mean, that's really what needed to happen, is a big, big rebuild. You didn't have very many great talents on defense. And then after Lincoln Riley left, you didn't really have a whole lot of great talents on offense either, as evidenced by 2020 and 2021 and them not reaching the expectations that were set before them. So there was a big rebuild that had to happen, and Brent Venables and his staff have done a great job doing it. Now, again, like Josh says, now you got to go win some football games, and you got to settle the foundation by winning games. But everything is looking like they're going to win a lot of football games this year. We'll see how many. We'll have you covered all season long here on Locked On Sooners. So make sure you're tuned in, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, hit that notification bell on YouTube to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can follow myself on Twitter at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. Make sure you go find the Discord link. We got a Discord chat opened up for all of Sooner Nation just to talk all things Oklahoma Sooners and what else? I mean, all kinds of things. NFL is going to get going. Major League Baseball, we got training camps for the NFL going. we're 2 months away from the postseason of Major League Baseball. So a lot to talk about in the sports world. We can do some of that over there in Discord. We'll drop the link in the YouTube and podcast chats as well, and on Twitter. So until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. Boomer Sooner.